technical problems. My name is Andrés Bianco, and I was part of this project called Otoharmonics. It has been supported by the ANI, and Jorge today explained the point of view of ANI, and I was on the other side. I am actually on the other side of the counter, so I want to give you an overview of what happens with the enterprises and the projects of the people who are supported by institutions such as ANI. So we are going to discuss from the concept to the cash out, from our initial idea to the final successful outcome. So I'm going to describe who we are, what is tinnitus, the film. This is not actually a photo, it is a film, so it has several moments in time, the significant stages, some recommendations and conclusions. These are my colleagues in the project. Firstly, Marisa Pedemonte, who is a specialist in sleep medicine. She is very well known. And then you see Daniel Drexler on the right, which is a musician and also a doctor who specializes in audition. And Darío GeiSinger, who has a PhD and is currently living in Israel. He works in a company called Libra at Home. And finally, me, I had the pleasure of studying at the University of the Republic, and I also studied an MBA, and now I'm working with a Uruguayan company. I want to explain what happened throughout this process, but firstly I would like to explain what tinnitus is. Firstly, it is a perception of a sound without an external stimulus. It is like an hallucination of hearing sounds. For example, we've been all to a party, and afterwards, during the night, we continue hearing a noise or some kind of buzzing. And some people have this imbalance in the auditory system all the time. It is a problem not of the ears, but of the central nervous system. 30 years ago, people believed that it was a problem of the ear, and the auditive nerve was severed, and people became deaf, and the tinnitus continued, which was, of course, terrible. And it's the same thing as losing an arm and then still feeling the missing arm or leg. So that's tinnitus. And the prevalence, that is to say how many people suffer from tinnitus, is from 10 to 12% of the population. And these are the main countries in the world where people are affected by tinnitus. What did our group do? We decided to stimulate people during sleep. Based on the plasticity of the central nervous system, the memory processes and the activity of the auditive system during the night, because memories work during the night, and we have an open window of stimulation of 8 hours, we give that person the same sound that person is perceiving. It's an hallucination, and we have to study it, and then the nervous system can lower the threshold of perception because the sound is coming from the outside. All this is an hypothesis on which we worked, and we saw good results. We did not want to interfere with daily activities of the patients. That is why the therapy had to be applied at home. We manufactured a product called Levo. It is run in an Apple platform in this case, but it can also be used with Android. And we have on the one hand the doctor, the patient, the devices, and the remotely the patient could consult the doctor, because we used to do this once a week for 20 minutes, but it was not enough. So we decided to adjust it remotely, and this allows us to make changes more quickly, because this problem is very dynamic and it changes with many things, for example, whether the person is stressed or not. So this is the timeline. In 1998, Daniel started doing treating musicians such as himself, and he started working with acoustic stimulation once a week with sounds similar to the one that they described. In 2002, he had already met Marisa before because he studied with her at some point, and they thought that it would be better to do the stimulation during the night because it was the time in which the patients were mostly bothered by tinnitus. And then in 2006, we were students who needed a final project for our studies, and precisely they needed this kind of support as doctors so that they could validate their ideas. As Jorge said, it is very important to validate your new ideas, and they asked us to give them technical support. In 2010, we had already been in touch with Annie and with a hospital in LA, the medical center Sinai, and once again with the support of Annie, we got the PPI instrument of prototypes, and this triggered a response from the hospital in the US. They realized that there was a Uruguayan institution that wanted to give us support, and they did too. By 2012, we had already realized that the market was not only Uruguay, but mostly the US and Europe, because that's where the big players were. So we decided to move the company to the US and set up Otoharmonics Corporation, a company that used Uruguayan assets, and now we started working for it. And finally, we did a cash out. That is to say, we left this building with this business in 2015. So from a technical point of view, in this timeline, it is clear that this is a multidisciplinary group. On the one hand, we have doctors and then engineering students, etc. In 2006, then, we set up a group based on the requirements of each of the parties. On the one hand, we have the academia. On the other hand, we have commercial considerations. And at the university, in the Institute of Electrical Engineering, in which we studied, we were realizing that the market didn't have much, was not really considered when students prepared their thesis. 90% of the theses ended up in a library and they were filed. And sometimes they were used as feedback for other studies, but those theses that ended up in commercial endeavors were very few. So there was a big divorce between the commercial goals and the graduate thesis of students of engineering. Between 2007 and 2009, we continued working, and after we had delivered our thesis, we wanted to reach a commercial product. So we did some pilot studies with very rudimentary devices. We lacked financing, and there was a lot of uncertainty about the continuity of our project. But we had this initial contact with the Sinai Medical Center, who made a study about the state of the art in the world. They said that what we were doing was good, but they were not really interested. And at that time, we met people from the ANI, and when we submitted our project, we told the hospital, ANI is going to support us. And then they said, well, the hospital is going to support you too. And that is how we set up Otoharmonics Uruguay. So the instrument was the PPI. We had the support of those two institutions. We formalized the work model, and we made an external study in order to be able to get a patent, and this is very important. Between 2010 and 2012, we had a finished product, software and hardware. We got the certification of ISO 13485 for medical devices, and we got a second round of financing through the ANI and SIDA Sinai. so as to be able to have access to foreign markets, especially in order to get the approval from the FDA in the US and the CE brand in Europe. We had a second clinical trial, published 2 papers, and got 2 PCT patents. We had to make presentations in the US. Everything and elsewhere, everything was new for us at the time, and we also got in touch with our competitors. And by 2012, everything was ready, and we took it to the US. What happened between 2012 and 2014? The whole operation was transferred to the US, and we were working by subcontracting. We had already had the approval from the FDA. We developed the second generation of the product, and we continued the clinical trial in several stages of sleep. We also made trials in the Netherlands and Canada. Now, in 2015, we did a cash out. At a certain point, when the operations were transferred to the US, we appointed a CEO in the US, someone who was familiar with the market, because for us from Uruguay it was very difficult to enter this world that moves millions of dollars. The strategy of the CEO was to make the company grow and then sell it. We remained as shareholders, but not in the board. We were still working, and the time or the period in which you leave a company can be very long, but we are people who have new frontiers that we want to explore. We didn't want to stay there. And since our company was favorably assessed, the hospital offered to buy our part. That was our cash out then. What can we take out from this experience in Uruguay? We wanted to launch generations. That means to do incremental work based on what we had already done. We wanted to show progress, to have some milestones, to establish contact networks, and this is fantastic and really necessary in order to be familiar with what your competitors are doing and get funding, so the cooperation with third parties is fundamental. And then you try to get together with people who can complete what you're doing and not merely compete with you. For those IT people among you, we work with MacLeod, for example, and we uploaded in an export shuffle who had no control over all these things. And then we evolved over the Apple platform, and we gained more control and more registries. And at a certain point, we wondered, what do we do? Do we manufacture hardware? And that is what we decided to use, what was out there already. And if there's any entrepreneurs here, it is important to understand that when you cross this path of when you travel this path of being an entrepreneur, you have to rent a premise, you have to pay bills, you have to talk to your accountant and sometimes go to some country and then to raise funds, and then you have to come here and you are in charge of your stuff and you become the orchestra man. You have to take care of so many things, and this is good, but you have to understand that you have to do all these things at the same time, and you have to realize that in this process the most important thing is to have good interpersonal relations and to have good chemistry with the members of your team. Some difficulties during the project. There was a long list of things to do and we lacked experience, so sometimes it was difficult because we didn't know, for example, our target market. The biological market is very difficult. There are very important players that we did not know. That is why we decided to move to the US. And then we lacked local support for clinical studies, and there were no basic sciences that were directly related to our project. We had a lot of support for the technological development, but not for the clinical validation. We did it anyway, though. And then we lacked local funds. I'm glad that Jorge has said that venture capitals are uh, increasing, but with hindsight, we missed a lot of opportunities because we did not find here people who were ready to invest venture capital. It was finally a hospital in the US that did this. And other things, there are certain systems in Uruguay that are incompatible with the type of entrepreneurship that we had in mind. Jorge said that entrepreneurs sometimes fail and they have but, for example, in Uruguay, some things are very difficult. The Ministry of Public Health took 2 years in authorizing our company. We got authorization from Europe before getting the authorization required in Uruguay to operate. Conclusion, with regard to the treatment, it's the best results achieved at a world level. And this we can say humbly because we have presented this project everywhere in the world, and no one can claim that they have the same results. We hope that there will be more similar projects in the world, but still ours is very good. We hope to be able to continue developing biotechnology products in Uruguay. Another good thing was that we were able to raise funds internationally and also to have the support of ANI. And it's a Uruguayan company certified with ISO 13485. Now, what happens when an institution like ANI supports an entrepreneur? How does the entrepreneur return this support? Sometimes with knowledge, other times things go wrong, and other times is by calculating that for each dollar that ANI or Uruguay invested in our project, $4 enter the country, and this is a positive balance. And then the project multiplied sixfold the total investment after 5 years. We had a successful cash out, and we increased our knowledge in many areas. Some proposals is to follow the project in parallel in all its dimensions and with coordination. For example, for 2016, there are new projects. We were supported because we had a prototype, but maybe from a commercial point of view, we had certain weaknesses. And now that we see a positive change, I think that this is going to be important for the people who want to become entrepreneurs. Then with regard to local investors, we have to look at the internal market, at the domestic market, and the non-traditional offer. And with this, I go back to venture capitals. With regard to the educational system, it is necessary to facilitate tools and approaches that have a commercial component. That is to say, that entrepreneurs have the possibility of being successful. For the entrepreneurs, it's necessary to do lobbying and to get in touch with networks that are already well established. You have to know the people, you have to know the world in which you are living, and you have to talk to people and use every instrument and tool available. And with regard to the institutions, it's very important to develop intellectual property protection and rights. It is very important to protect the creations of entrepreneurs. I've done this presentation before, and in blue you see the countries that have subscribed or that are members of patent and property right protection at a world level. Uruguay has not signed this treaty. Therefore, it is much more difficult for an entrepreneur in Uruguay to get a patent on a certain product, because we are not members of these kind of treaties. Therefore, we should try to encourage that our country becomes party to these treaties. I think that there have been discussions in Parliament in this regard. For the future, we now are setting up a new enterprise which is called BRAC or BRAC. It is an advanced system for people who have balance disorders, and we're also creating a device that is used at home, and it recreates virtual reality. We are working with an Israeli company. That's why a colleague is in Israel right now, and hopefully we will be successful. So once again, I would like to thank Annie for the support they gave us at the time, and because they invited us today to share experience. I want to congratulate GeneXus, and once again, I would like to thank Annie for having given money to people who look like that in the picture. I think that that's interesting. They didn't prejudge our appearance. So again, thank you very much.